Hi, my name is Christina, and welcome to Divine Energy in Motion. Today, I'd like to talk about affirmations as it relates to inner child work and shadow work. So, what is inner child work? And my interpretation of inner child work is essentially working with a child within me that didn't get what she needed at various stages in my childhood. Shadow work, I would say, is something very similar in terms of connecting through your inner child. Shadow work, I would say, are those darknesses, if you will, that I have within myself that are connected through beliefs that I formed as a child. So I would say a lot of the times for me, shadow work and inner child work go hand in hand, in that in order to work on those darknesses within me, I have to go back to the beginning in my childhood where I learned beliefs based on what I saw or my connections and my interactions with others. Affirmations were positive enforcements that I used over and over again with myself to kind of rewire the neural pathways in my head so that I could replace the negative mental chatter that I had pretty consistently going on with something more positive, or even just no mental chatter at all. As I had mentioned in a previous video, back in 2020, at the beginning of a pandemic, when my father had passed away with that first wave of COVID deaths, I had reached out to a medium who I then was able to work with and do a lot of this inner child work and shadow work. And some of the exercises that were suggested to me were basically writing down all of my traumas. Let's say I started with my father. I tried to think of the person that I thought at the time, and I hate to use the word trauma, but I guess was traumatized the most by, and then write down the events in detail as I remembered them, and then come up with a list of feelings that I felt as a result of those events. And so I went event by event, writing down with as much detail as I could remember what had happened, in my life with this particular person, my dad. And so at the end of all of it, I aggregated all of the words, actually put it in Excel. Very accountant of me. And I removed all the duplicates and came up with a list of the negative feelings that I had that were directly related to the events that happened with my dad. And I used those words to create affirmations, positive statements to override those feelings that I had been feeling with more positive feelings about myself. For example, I never got the attention that I needed from my father growing up. A solution as an adult for me was to give myself the attention that I was looking from him, in turn, that I ended up seeking outside of myself through others in an effort to combat the negative chatter. And I came up with an affirmation that was, I am worthy of genuine attention. And I'd say that over and over again in my head. So, whatever list of feelings that I came up with, I just would create an affirmation to combat those feelings. And I would say them in the morning. I would say them before I went to sleep. I would say them periodically during the day. I mean, at the end of the day, I had a long list of negative feelings that I had related to all of these events. So it took time. This wasn't something that was that I was able to do overnight. It took me a while. Of course, everyone is different. But over time, I started to notice that this negative chatter that I had in my head would slowly either stop, or I was able to identify it while it happened instead of like be in this continuous loop of self deprecation, if you will. And then it would start to go away until finally it got to a point where I wouldn't feel the way I was feeling, um, you know, for years, my entire life, if you will. Um, and I had, as I had mentioned in a previous video, I was a professional patient. I went to therapy for like 20 years. I'm not sitting here saying that I'm a psychologist because I am not, but I did have a lot of therapists and I did try a lot of things to kind of heal these things within me. And if I'm being honest, for me, none of the things that I had tried to do worked. But this literally was the only thing that gave me lasting um, relief, if you will. It's within the repetition, being consistent, doing it over and over and over again, relentlessly, was where I found change. That I think was what remapped those neural pathways for me. I mean, they don't have to be affirmations that are super, you know, long or in depth. They could be something very simple. Maybe I felt stupid, so I could say, I am smart. Or I felt abandoned. I could say, I am worth the attention. So it's whatever really resonated with me. It wasn't anything that I went out to look for, anything special. It was literally just something that I could remember, that I could say over and over again to myself, that could really stick. Of course, like I said before, these aren't the exact definitions of inner child work or shadow work, but these are my own interpretations and what I felt helped me through exercises that I have received. The actual, I don't know, instructions, if you will, are pretty simple, but it's more complicated than that because when I documented all of these events, a lot of different emotions came up. Um, a lot of different feelings that I wasn't even aware that I was feeling. It was just kind of buried underneath this existence of myself. So, the exercise and doing that and taking the time to do that for myself, it it was a labor of love for myself. This is definitely the self-care that I think, people mean when they say that you have to care for yourself, that you have to love yourself. It's not taking a bubble bath, which that's great too, and that is part of self-care, but it's these really gritty aspects of myself that I really didn't want to address, that I didn't want to feel, that I didn't want to process. And it's the act of unraveling all of that and kind of putting it out in the open and allowing myself to look at it and see it for what it is so that I could process and heal those feelings. Just that act alone and doing that on a consistent basis is such an act of love for myself and just effort on behalf of myself that I truly believe it's in that's you find self-love for yourself. There's an amount of compassion that I had to have for myself in this process because it is very easy for me to sit and beat myself up about it and say, well, why didn't you feel this way? Or why did you allow somebody to have that power over you in feeling that way? And that's okay because I'm human and I'm living the human experience. And it's interesting. So yesterday I took a yoga class on this app that I have called Glow. And one of the yoga instructors, her name is Elena Brower. I think she's phenomenal. And she really resonates with me. And she had a yoga practice, and it was called Warming Self Compassion. And the whole class was dedicated to self compassion, in those moments where you need to give yourself that tenderness. And one of the things that she had learned from a teacher to say to herself was, how human of it, how human of me to feel this way. How human of me to feel this way. To tell herself that during moments of, vulnerability, if you will. So I really love that quote, and I want to start using it more often because, it's true. Like, this is for me a human experience, and it is very human of me to feel the feelings that I have felt, over the course of my life. And there's no reason to beat myself up about it, especially if I'm consciously trying to make a change. Also, I would say one of the key things in this entire process is forgiveness. And I would say that was very difficult for me. And the forgiveness is key. It's not really so much for the person that I'm forgiving, but more so to release myself from the resentment of feeling either misunderstood or mistreated. Because for me, I would relive things. For instance, I didn't talk to my father for a very extended period of time before he passed away, probably like 5 years at first. And then I talked to him for like 9 months, and then another 10 years, and then he passed away. So I was never able to resolve, my issues with him. So every day I remember waking up and the first thing that I thought about was him, and, what I would tell him if I ever saw him again, because I was so angry with him. And, the last thing I would think at night was what I would tell him, because I was so angry with him. And it was just on and on and on. And I just carried this anger and this bitterness and this resentment towards him. And it, not to say that it had an effect on him or not. I mean, it could have, it couldn't have. I'm sure, it had its effect on him. But on me, it was awful, because it just was such a terrible place to wake up, like such a terrible state in which to wake up, such a terrible state in which to go to sleep, such a terrible state in which to conduct my life, because, I hadn't forgiven him. If anything, I'd gotten more and more upset. And so, I was able to forgive him after doing a lot of this work. I was able to, let everything go, because it wasn't serving me. It obviously wasn't serving him. It wasn't going to help a relationship. He obviously had passed away. And in that forgiveness, um, it freed up space for new thoughts. All that time that I had spent thinking of what I would tell him and what I would say and what made me mad, and all of the things that had occurred to me in my childhood, in terms of him neglecting me, or not spending enough time with me. All of that was replaced with new space to be able to think other things that were more conducive to my life. And so, forgiveness of him, forgiveness of myself, forgiveness of everything. Because again, it's such a weight that I was carrying, that it would have made me, it did, I mean, it would have made me sick. I'm sure it would have shortened my life if I had continued carrying on in the way in which I was carrying on mentally. Also, seeing this other person as an expression of myself, because at the end of the day, there isn't a them versus us. It is all us. It's not idealistic to think that we're a one unity consciousness. We literally are one unity consciousness, whether people choose to believe it or not. And we literally are just a reflection of each other from different perspectives, meaning that they're different variations of truths and, different variations of perspectives. And as soon as I was able to kind of grasp that and see myself and others and have that compassion for myself, then I was able to have more compassion for others and therefore be able to forgive others, because at the end of the day, they're just me. Forgiveness isn't this exercise of accepting toxic behavior. It's not saying, oh, okay, because people did this to me, I forgive them. That makes it okay. It's literally not about them at all. It's about you. And maybe them in a certain regard, because if you're able to forgive and let that go, you kind of lead by example as to the type of person you want to be and as to the type of world or reality that you want to live with. You want to set the example. You want to live in a reality where people act the same way in which you strive to act. It's really an exercise in releasing resentment and an exercise in changing my belief system. Because a belief system dictates everything about my life, how I see my life, what I pay attention to, what I attract. It's all based on my belief system. And my belief system creates self-imposed limitations. So if my belief system has me thinking that I can't do something or that I'm destined to be a certain way, it will be true, because the universe supports me regardless of what I think. If I believe that today is going to be a great day, it's going to be a great day. If I believe today isn't going to be a great day, it's not going to be a great day. I mean, it's really down to what I truly believe is what ends up radiating around me. My beliefs kept me from living authentically, and in that authenticity was my happiness and my connection. Changing how I view myself has been fundamental in changing my life. Maybe shadow work doesn't necessarily have to extend to inner child work. Perhaps you had an amazing childhood, but you've had relationships or other interactions or connections with people that left you traumatized. The same principles would work. I would suppose you could still recap an event that you had maybe with a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a close friend or anyone really, and write down how you felt, after or during that interaction, and then write affirmations to be able to help rewire your neural pathways and that negative mental chatter. It really, at the end of the day, doesn't necessarily matter if it's in childhood or adulthood or whatever. If you're left with a certain set of beliefs that are based on experiences that you've had, there's no reason why this exercise wouldn't work in that regard. So let's recap. 1, outlining events that created negative beliefs about myself. 2, creating affirmations to change the negative beliefs and remap neural pathways. 3, forgiveness for self and others. 4, compassion for self and others. And 5, consistency. I'd love to hear any suggestions you have or your experience in inner child work and shadow work within the comments. Remember to hit that like and subscribe button. Thank you so much. Until next time.